Hello, DevOps people. My name is Jochen, and I'm happy to have you here for my live coding session. Today, I'm going to take a look at our most important chef cookbook. And I'm going to do some refactoring because it's not only our most important chef cookbook, it's one of our oldest chef cookbooks, and has been touched quite a few times over the recent years. The cookbook's name is Freistilbox, which, not coincidentally, is the name of our hosting platform. It's a managed hosting platform specialized and optimized for running two open source content management systems, Drupal and WordPress. So it's very PHP centric, and the Freistilbox cookbook does all the setup for the machines that run our customers' web applications. There are two types of machines that have the web applications deployed: the web boxes, the actual web servers, and the shell boxes, where our customers can log in via SSH and work with their application, do maintenance and stuff. So the shell boxes need the same applications deployed as the web boxes, and on top of that, the web boxes have an actual web server running. And the web boxes aren't able to, you can't log into these web boxes. The shell box is the only exception where you can actually log in. So, as always, if you have any questions, if you have feedback, if something doesn't work, or if you'd like me to explain something in more depth, please let me know in the chat. And if you like, simply say hello in the chat so I can see that you are actually there, and that I can see that the chat box here is working. And with that, I think let's get started. I already have the Freistilbox cookbook loaded in my editor here, and I'll focus on two chef recipes here. There is the Apache recipe that sets up the actual web server boxes. Hello to you too, Marcus. And the sites recipe, which is kind of a helper recipe, and that's why it starts with an underscore. It's not it's kind of a private recipe in terms of Ruby, in the way that the sites recipe will never be in a node's run list. But it gets included by both the Apache recipe that sets up the web boxes and the shell recipe that sets up the shell boxes that have the same web applications but no web server. So there has been some kind of refactoring by moving all the common functionality into the sites recipe. And when we take a look at this recipe, which started in 2012, so it's 5 years old now, there has also been some refactoring in the sense that there is a Freistilbox class defined that has quite a number of methods, which almost all get called here. So there is Freistilbox normalize site ID, normalize client ID, name for site, username for site, user ID for site, group name for client and group ID for client, path to site shared, path to site user home. So these are all things that need to be determined within this loop that iterates over all websites that get deployed to a single server, which come out of this method call, FryStillBox websites on cluster, and is basically the result of a search where we search a data bag named websites, and we get back all the websites that are on a particular cluster, of which the node this recipe gets executed on is a part of. And so we iterate over this, get all this information about the site, and then we go ahead and set up groups and users and directories. Quite common stuff, actually. Nothing really highly sophisticated. The thing is, this recipe is pretty long and needs a bit of refactoring. And there's another thing that I don't like. Both the sites recipe and the Apache recipe and the shell recipe have the same kind of loop in there, where the sites recipe takes all the websites and does the basic stuff. Then either the Apache recipe or the shell recipe run over the same loop doing their specific stuff. So this loop gets executed at least 2 times on both web and shell nodes, and that's not particularly elegant. So one of my goals is to see if there is a way that we run through this loop only once and restructure things so that we can say, okay, let's loop over all the websites. If we are on a web box, do this, and if we are on a shell box, do that, and then we're done. But first, I'll do a bit more common refactoring. Let's go back to the sites recipe and take a look at all these method calls here. So it's always normalize site ID for a certain site, normalize the client ID for another field of the same site. So here, this is basically a data bag item, and we take different fields from this data bag item and do something with that information. It is always... all these methods have the site or site ID as their argument. In this case, it's client ID, but client ID again is the client ID field of the site data bag item. And yeah, while I felt pretty clever creating these methods in the first place, so we can call them easily, I should have seen that this is basically doing a step backwards from object-oriented design back to a more procedural approach. But in my defense, I was pretty new to adding libraries to chef cookbooks in the first place. So let's make some progress here in terms of design. And let's take a look at the library file that defines all these methods. So it is actually a class derived from chef recipe that simply makes it possible to call all these methods simply with the FryStillBox name instead of having to make the call more elaborate. And then it simply defines a bunch of helper methods, and each and every of these helper methods either gets the site ID as an argument, or it gets something else that is connected to the site. So what I should have done in the first place is to create a class that might be named FryStillBox site. And is actually a class that can be instanced. So we'll instantiate this with the site ID parameter, or we could even simply pass the data bag item that we already get out of the chef search. So data bag item. And now we can change these class methods to instance methods. For a quick change, we could simply say, okay, that's data bag item cluster ID. Let's see how this particular method is used. I'm not too sure. Where is it used in the first place? Check cluster ID. Okay, that gets called before we even run our loop and get all the sites, so it can't be part of the site class. Let's take another approach. Let's split this up. We'll do something like this. So we have, I haven't yet even saved it, so that's good. I'll make a copy. Libraries, FryStillBox, site.rb. We'll revert this. And take everything out that is directly connected to the site, which is everything except the first, I think. And I guess these helper methods for which we still have to check if they are even used. That's that. And here in FryStillBox site, we can make the changes that I wanted to do. So normalize site ID. Instead of passing it as an argument, we'll simply use what we already get from the databag item. I'll have to restore the initialize method. Site ID would be data bag. Oh, we'll use that a lot, so I'll simply define an ID method that returns data bag item ID. And I'd like to eventually rename these methods that they're not so that there are nouns instead of verbs. So this should be named site ID normalized, but we can do that later. Let's keep the names as they are to make things a bit easier. I see. So the thing is, all these sites have IDs like site 1, 2, 3, 4, and normalized site ID will simply strip the site prefix and simply return basically the site number, and all the subsequent methods here like name for site will use this normalized ID. So that basically is normalize site ID. It should be called site number. and client number. All these different naming schemes. Name for site, but username for site. Yeah, okay, makes sense, but I need to change this. So, okay, username for site. That's basically... Okay, I'll keep it, and I'll change it later. So this method is has the identical result than as the method before, but it keeps things autonomous. So we might be able to change it later if we want to do that. So in this case, the system user ID is 100,000 plus the site number. I'll have to start changing names since we are not passing client number as an argument anymore. I'll call this system group name. That's... oh no, that's not data bag item client number, that's actually client number. So this is system group ID. That's system user ID. That's system user name. I'll think of a better name for that as well. So that method here, this method here returns a path to the shared storage we use. In this case, I pass in the root directory of the storage and the client number. We already do know the client number, so I'll do client storage path. Simply pass in the root directory that comes out of the recipe. And group name for client. So there is that is system group name, right? Yeah, I think so. Or is there another instance of that? No, I think it's system group name. And that doesn't have to be on separate lines anymore. Then we have some variations of this theme. In this case, it's the local path for the client. So we'll say client local path. We're using double quotes. I actually don't really know what site path fragment means, but it's name for site. Okay, let's keep it for the moment. Site path fragment. We don't need to pass in the site ID. We can simply say name for site. Then path to site shared. Is the site storage path. And that's exactly the client storage path with the site name appended. So this is client storage path. And then site path fragment. I think that makes particular lot of sense. I'd simply say name for site. I think we got too many levels of abstraction here, and we don't need the return statement. So let's remove that before Robocop tells us to. Okay. I think this will be so much more straightforward when I'm done. So let's see, path to site local, that's the site local path. And of course, that's simply the client local path. With the name for site appended. Now we have a directory for temporary files. So that's site temp path, site temp local path. Interestingly, okay, yeah, no, it's site ID is always the, in this case, it has to be name for site. It's always name for site. But I don't think the storage directory that gets passed in will be the same path that the previous methods get. So we'll have to take a look at that later. Not so to avoid confusing people. Then we have the site user home. That's basically site user path. The path to the user's home directory, which is relevant on the shell box, where the user actually logs in, and where we need to store a few things for our customers to use. So I think instead of storage, I'll simply say okay, let's work with storage root again. And then username for site, which was system username. Then we have a method that transforms the data bag item itself. Of course, we don't have to pass in the item because that's already an instance variable. And I think these are actual helper methods that we'll leave in the original helper library file. Okay. So what do we have? We have a class, FryStillBox site, that gets initialized with a data bag item and is able to derive all kinds of stuff from the contents of this data bag item, mainly the site ID and the site, the client ID. Everything else is basically built upon this, so that should be okay. How do we apply this? First of all, no, we don't have to include the library file itself because it gets required automatically by Chef. And now we simply initialize an object. Naming things. Let's think about that for a second. I'm tempted to name the object instance site, So since the data bag is named websites, I'll use the same name here. And that will enable me to use the name site for this. So that's called FryStillBox site website. And we can get rid of all these variables. Let's comment them out for a start, because I probably need to reference this at one point. Let's leave the debug entry here. We can simply say creating site ID. And here we need the main domain. Okay, we can basically work with the website variable here. Creating website ID. And since we are in an interpolation, let's change the quotes. Okay, that should be it. Debug output first, then we'll create our object instance. And from here on, we should be able to work with site and its methods. So site group name is actually site system group. Oh dear. Okay, that's where it starts to get interesting. System group name. User name. Site system user ID. System group ID. And site user path. That's site shared path. I think this is in more modern Ruby versions. This is 0, 0, and then the octal number. Then we have site shared, which is again the site shared path. Hey Aaron, how you doing? Welcome to my stream. Site shared path. So what I'm doing here is refactoring a cookbook, especially its helper functions. And I've just introduced a new object class that I can use to get all the different information I need, which is all stored in this site object here. And at the moment I'm just updating the recipe to use the new method names. Site shared path should be okay. And it's site system user name. So basically I'm replacing global helper functions with methods of a helper class. Site system group name. Site shared is site shared path. Or is it not? This is pretty confusing. Because I'm using the shared path and then adding shared as a string, and that's then the shared storage. That doesn't make too much sense. It's very, very ambiguous. Oh, you've never used Chef? Have you used any kind of system automation before? What does site shared path do? Oh, it's site storage path. That makes much more sense. Yeah, it does make much more sense. So site storage path, and then we add shared. And that becomes shared storage. Okay, I'm happy with that. Site system user name, system group name, okay. Okay, I see. Yeah, what's nice about Chef is that it has its own DSL, where at first you don't have to do much in terms of Ruby programming. You simply use the resources that it offers you, like here, directory or user or things like that. But then you can use standard Ruby code on top. For example, in my case here, defining a class that I can instantiate, and in this case in the site variable, and then simply call the methods of this object. So if things get more complex, you can go beyond what Chef offers you and simply use the wealth of things Ruby does offer you. And in the end, it made us it enabled us to do pretty sophisticated things that we wouldn't be able to by using simply what comes out of the box with Chef. On the other hand, if you're using Docker, it's a bit of a question whether to use Chef at all, and if yes, how, because there are many other options to automate things if you're using Docker, with, of course, the 800-pound gorilla of Kubernetes in the room, or we are exploring another more lightweight orchestration platform called Container, which again is written in Ruby, and that's why we like it. That's one of the reasons why we like it, because all the Ruby skills that we have acquired over the years, we can apply them again using Container. But I digress. We are done with this recipe, and I hope it makes more sense. I think it's more to the point and uses less standalone variables. Pretty sure I have at least one error in there, and I need to think about how to catch them. But we'll see when we do a test run. So let's be more consistent and call this shared storage path. If we are refactoring, let's do it right. Okay, didn't take much effort. Okay. That wasn't too bad. And now we'll have to do the same for the Apache recipe. Where we have the same loop and the same craft in terms of variables. And we'll be able to make this a lot better and easier to read. So let's start by renaming this variable. In this case, I already have the debug entry first in the loop. I guess we can even get rid of that preparations comment. There is not much of preparations anymore. We'll simply do a log entry and then create our new helper object. And we can get rid of all that stuff. So we don't... Okay, these comments make more sense, but questionable. So, let's see. Add Apache user to site group name. And site group name is site dot system group name. So Aaron, if something grabs your eye and you'd like to know a bit more what this does in Chef or something, feel free. Just hit me in the chat. Okay, site name is... yeah, what is it? Name for site. How about simply name, since we are already in the site context of this class. So it's, instead of site underscore name, is site dot name. Site.name plus site cluster. Let's use website here. I might add a cluster method later, but I could quickly get into the situation that I have to create a method for each and every field of the databag item, which I'm reluctant to do at this time. And then, let's see. Instead of site ID, it's site.id. Oh no, oh yeah. See, that's where our naming was pretty inconsistent. What's named site ID here is site name. Is the site number. And then it makes sense to make it an integer. Aaron writes, I recently started learning Ruby actually, and the do keywords, so kind of does the statement beforehand get passed into the block. Let's go back. I think I know what you mean. You mean this here, do. So do is basically only a block delimiter, and in this case it delimits a block of a loop that iterates over the elements in websites. Websites is an array whose each method iterates over its elements, and the variable name in these vertical lines means take each value that you are iterating over, store it in this variable so we can use it as a loop variable wherever we need it. So in this case here, a website is simply the value, one of the values we are iterating over. And it's a local variable within this loop block. Okay, here we are. Site number 2. Okay, now we have site.name. Okay, wherever we use fields of the data bag item, we don't go through the object, I'd say, and simply take the original data bag item website. Lots of variables. Exactly, it's a for each loop. It might become a bit confusing here because I expect that we'll be able to take a few of these values out of the site object, and other values will need to come from the website data bag item. But yeah, let's see. So this is now named system group name. Site local is site storage local path or something. Site local path. And site shared path. Oh, that's not shared path, that's storage path. Site temp local is site temp local path. I think we have to do a bit more renaming later. Site. So what did we say? Site temp local path. But still with the site prefix. I'm not happy about that. All this duplication site.site doesn't really transport the message. But again, it's a site local path. Just to be sure, yeah, site local path. Here we take fields right off the data bag item. Yeah, and I already see that using site and website as two different things is confusing as well. I need to change that as well. Site FP import. That is something new. I don't think we have defined that as a method. So how is this actually calculated? Don't know if have I already saved? No, I haven't. Nice. Where is site FP import actually declared? That is strange. Oh, it must have been defined before in line 107. Oh yeah, here. Okay. Yeah, that's where it got defined. Okay. So it's actually a variable. Okay. Site FPM port. And then we have site name, which again is site.name. Site system username. System group name. That's a data bag item again. Okay. Let's take another look at the local stuff. We took storage. Okay. Yep. So, I guess the third file that we need to refactor will be the shell recipe, which I guess should be pretty short, under 200 lines. And I guess we can also get rid of a lot of variable names and variable definitions here, all the same stuff. So I'll carry on using websites here for the time being. We can get rid of the whole preparations thing, except the debug message. And instead of defining hundreds of variables, we'll go and... Nope, that's not the right file. I meant this one. We go and define a single object. That's the site user path. again, that's the site user path. Wait. Site shared. Site shared was path to site shared. And path to site shared is now site storage path. That's basically just remembering the old variable names and replacing them with the right method name. And hoping things make more sense then. That's site storage path. Creating lots of symlinks here to make things easier for the users. And we could make things a bit easier here, because all we are doing is recreating a directory hierarchy, at least in the case of these two final symlinks. Yeah, introducing a loop doesn't make much sense for two elements. So that's site local path. These are some hard-coded paths, which I don't like, but that's another thing I'll have to deal with later. Okay. I'm also trying to get our literal strings more consistently enclosed in double quotes. That's that. Okay. Hey, sir. How you doing? Welcome to the stream. What brings you here? I'm fine, thanks. But I'm a bit nervous because I made lots of changes to our most important cookbook, and I'm pretty reluctant to try and execute it because it's almost certain it'll break. Okay, let's take a look at the box recipe. This might be another place where we use all these variables and helper functions. I'm pretty sure there is a loop somewhere, isn't there? Here we are. And again, lots of local variables. Yeah, just to make things clear, Murung here, Marcus is one of my colleagues who makes sure that I don't miss anything. Sorry for botching your name, Marcus. It's hard to switch between German and English. Okay, back to the issue at hand. Yeah, so we have another loop and another variable list from hell, and so I'll go ahead and make the same changes I'd done before to the other recipes. Rename this to websites. Yes, this is Ruby. It's a chef recipe, but chef is basically a DSL, a domain-specific language based on Ruby. So it is actual Ruby code, but normally chef recipes just use the resources that chef brings out of the box, and what we do is take advantage of the fact that it is Ruby and make things a bit more complex and possibly a bit more complicated than it has to be. And that's why I've decided to do a bit of refactoring today, to make way for important changes that we are going to do next week. It's always good to start with some refactoring. And so just to fill you in, here this list of variable names will be used below all the time, and it's just ugly. So what I did was, instead of having a library that defines a lot of helper functions, replace this library with a class that has the same functions as methods, and that will enable me to work with a single variable instead of lots of variables. And in doing this, I also changed the names to be a bit more self-explanatory. So I'll get the list of website data bag items here, which is a list of websites we want to install on this server. Iterate over this list. And then get rid of all that cruft. Simply do a debug output in the log. And we can get rid of all these variables and replace them. With a single one, let's see, with this one here. So we'll take website and instantiate an object from that. And then we can work with this. And instead of site user home, we'll use site user path, site system username, site system group name, site local path, I guess the fact if I'm able to remember the method names already proves if the names are good or not. Because I should be able to guess them, basically. Is it site temp local path? It is, but that's not the file I'm meant to read. Oh, okay, yeah, it is, yeah, I'm getting confused. Site system username, system group name, that's site local path. And you have the links again. Yeah. Even the fact that this is repeated means we have to probably refactor this and create a definition or something. But one thing at a time. site local path. Shouldn't it be named local storage path and shared storage path? It's site storage path and site local path. No, that's not good. Hey Papa J, thanks for following. Okay, even if I get myself in hot water here and certainly break things, this should not be named site storage path, it should be shared storage path. Yeah. And local storage path. And then local temp path. And user home path. See how we get rid of all these site prefixes? That makes much more sense. Which means I'd have to make a few changes again, but it's all for the better. So it's not site local path, it's local storage path. Local storage path. And shared storage path. I apologize, this is a bit boring, but it's really necessary work. And it might be preparation for what I could do next week, which is extend our setup. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. What was this site shared? So it's a shared storage path. Thanks, Aaron. Local storage path. Let's make that proper octal numbers. I just realized here we're using deployed here, and deployed here is defined as the local storage path with .deploy as a subdirectory, and that's exactly what we use here, but we make it concatenate that again, so we could simply say that's deployed here as well. And let's be honest, a loop over a single element, isn't that a bit overkill? It's simply directory deployed here. And no file join necessary. Very inconsistent quoting in here. Site ID is always site.name. Site config, where do you come from? It's in box 256, so that should be right. Probably oh, that's somewhere else completely. I guess I deleted that, huh? Site config. Yeah, I'm using it, but I deleted the definition. So let's restore that. Or no, we'll use that as a as a as another method. All right, I think it's time to come to an end. And I guess I'll make the final changes myself and do a few test runs. And if everything works, I might be back next week with the actual work that I'm laying the groundwork for here. But I guess it'll be a lot of repetition still for the next few minutes, I guess. And so I'll stay around in the chat, but I'll be probably a bit quicker with doing the rest outside of the chat, outside of the stream. And I feel that I'm getting a bit loopy. Anyway, if you have any questions, you can tweet me, you can email me. I'll stay around in the chat for a while, so simply let me know if you have any questions, and let me know if you have any feedback or suggestions for things that I could be doing. And if you like my stream, please follow the account, and then I'll see you next time. Cheers.